Welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour Podcast. As always here, I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander, and I'm rejoined by the recurring guest himself, Jake Carlson, for all college football stuff. And today we have the third member of, I would say, the prime LA sports weekend trip the fall of last year. Brian Shrull joined us as well. Shrull, how's it going?
Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad I could be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Glad all the schedules aligned here with, Jake's schedule, your schedule, my schedule. Glad we were able to fit it on in. So,
I don't know. Mine's pretty busy.
Well, same here. The whole working from home thing every day just really stacks up my schedule just out the wazoo. But that being said, Shrull, where are you coming from us today? You home? I know you travel a bunch for work, so.
I am home, Wichita Falls, Texas, about 2 hours west of Dallas.
All right, lovely area of the country, I'm sure.
It's about 80 degrees here in January.
Oh, well, I'm jealous then. Jake and I are both jealous. It's been raining here the whole week. It's been 57 degrees.
I know.
So.
That is true.
A bit different.
Yeah. For once, we're jealous of the Texas weather. Got to poke fun where I can, though. With that being said, though, so Monday night was the College Football National Championship game. Georgia beat TCU, in case you've been living under a rock, and it wasn't really even that much of a game. But we just want to recap the whole college football season here, get into a little bit of maybe saying who we think our odds on favorably next year. I'm just going to early on just say it's Georgia versus anyone else, in my opinion. But I'll hear what you guys have to think later on. And maybe at the end, if we have some time, get to the state of Oklahoma State football as well, too. With that being said, Shrull, what did you think of Monday night's game? Did that go how you expected it to at all? Or do you have TCU? What were you thinking?
It makes sense that Georgia won in a blowout. When you look at those guys, I mean, SEC kind of gets this a lot, but like those Georgia guys just look like they are NFL players already. And then TCU has had an incredible season, and I don't think that should be taken away from them because of what happened on Monday night. But it's just not the same. I mean, they could not stop Georgia's pass rush. They could not get really any pressure on Stetson Bennett. Just across the board, they were just outmanned. And that happens. And that is okay. We have blowouts in championship games sometimes. I kind of was holding on some hope that maybe the team of destiny for TCU might be able to keep it close. But turns out, I think Georgia closes like a 13-point favorite or something. And it wasn't that was too small of a number.
It's really weird when you see both, not only the spread and then the actual outcome happen much worse than you could even imagined. Let's be honest here, Georgia could have put up 70. It was just Georgia punted at one point in the game, and that was like a highlight because they hadn't punted the whole game. So, in college football too, when the clock stops after every first down and all that type of stuff, that's kind of a big deal. Jake, what were your reactions from the game though?
I wasn't really surprised. Now, I was surprised by the final score. But I wasn't surprised that Georgia dominated. It was more so just the fact of it was 65-7. That was Georgia winning and covering was not surprising to me. If anything, I just think this makes Michigan look really bad. That was kind of my whole takeaway. TCU deserved to be in the playoff, but this makes Michigan look really, really bad.
I think it points to the coaching of TCU that they spent that 3 weeks leading up to the semifinal game, and they were able to scheme together a great game. They were able to confuse J.J. McCarthy with that 3-3-5 defense. But then you have a week to the championship game, and you can only do so much planning and scheming in that time. And I don't even know if 3 weeks would have mattered because Georgia was just better across the board. So I think we were kind of due for a letdown championship game after two incredible semifinal games.
I'd say you either get incredible semifinal games or an incredible championship game. And to be honest, the semifinal games were so awesome. I take that for two awesome games versus a weird Monday night game. I'm not going to understand with everyone on Twitter of why is this game on a Sunday night, on a Monday night, excuse me? Why not just have it on a Saturday night? But, it goes up against the NFL. Well, what should happen? The NFL has Monday night games. We should just all just switch it back. Just college football Saturday, Monday night can be, and then I don't know, maybe tailgating could be a thing. People really can't tailgate too much in a Monday night in a big city, which is where every single national championship is. It's usually a big city on a Monday night. So can help out tailgating a little bit and help out some parking issues as well. If maybe, I don't know, it's on a weekend. You're not worried about like messing up the traffic in LA and the lot sizes of other people going to work until 5 when the championship game's at 4:30. What are we doing? Regardless of that, though, I mean, Georgia's, you guys both hit on it. Georgia's size is just incredible. Like their tight ends, they have one tight end who go to the NFL probably this offseason. He can't. He has to stay one more year in Bowers. And he's 6'4". But they have another tight end who didn't play the second half because he got injured. But that guy's 6'7". So, like, I mean, these guys need to just start playing pickup basketball or something instead. They need to switch sports. This is too good. We can't run with them. I've got 7 other things here to talk about as far as, like, I think TCU deserved a shot. I mean, we all, like, agree on that point, right? You play the games in front of you, you go for it, and then it just sucks. I think it would suck to be TCU because you didn't win something this year as far as, like, you didn't watch national championship or a Big 12 championship. Maybe we should have seen this coming because Alabama just ran over K-State, but all bowl games are just so hard to figure out anyways versus, like, who cares, who doesn't. And the SEC almost never cares. So, like, if K-State had beat Alabama by 2, then would we have all thought something different? Probably not. So
no. I mean, I just like the whole narrative that all of a sudden comes up that like TCU didn't belong there was really funny to me because we heard all year about how good Michigan was. And like that's what I keep going back to is I'm like, okay, well, you sat here and told me that this team was so good. And then, God forbid, J.J. McCarthy has to play defensive backs. And he throws 2 pick sixes. So it's like, it wasn't that they didn't deserve to be there. And I'm not necessarily saying that Georgia would have thumped Michigan or thumped Ohio State. Obviously, they didn't thump Ohio State. But they wouldn't have beat Michigan as bad as they did TCU. But TCU clearly wasn't stubborn in their game plan either. Like they were going to run what they were going to run, what they did all year. Michigan would have came out and ran, the freaking triple option just so Georgia didn't have the ball. So the game could have been 24-7 instead of 65-7 because Michigan's like, we're going to run the ball and we're going to chew 5 minutes off the clock every single time we get it, whether we score or not. It doesn't matter.
I think the argument that I've heard a few times is you should get the 4 best teams in the playoff to determine the best team. It's like, no, you get the 4 most deserving. If you look at college basketball, you don't always get the best 4, like the best 4 teams from the whole season get to the Final Four. That doesn't happen because you have Cinderella stories. St. Peter's was not one of the best 8 teams in the country last year. Just they got hot and they went on a run. You're finding the best teams at the time, the most deserving that can put something special together.
If it's me personally, like what are we doing? Alabama didn't win the SEC West. They didn't deserve a chance. I mean, what LSU has 4 losses, let's put them in instead. Like what you have to win the games in front of you. Oklahoma State didn't make national championship in 2011 because we lost to Iowa State, right? Like, now, regardless if you want to say we actually won or not, we lost the game and we weren't in. That was the whole deal. You lost that game, so you weren't in. When I think a lot of people, in retrospect, would say we should have probably deserved to be there. I mean, deserved is maybe the key word here, but we definitely had the talent to be there. I mean, we had several NFL guys, on the roster there. We had several different other points I could probably bring up as clearly a huge Oklahoma State fan since wearing a jersey on the podcast here and have the background Oklahoma State wise as like another reason why, I mean, my bias is clearly I'm in front of everyone, but for the TCU in 2014, for the, you know what, like, I don't know, should have really been Alabama, Georgia. Should you ever really have 2 SEC teams? Well, last year there were 2 SEC teams. The game went down to the final 4th quarter and it was really close and it was a lot of fun. But this year it wasn't two SEC teams, so now there's got to be an issue. My biggest concern is that the Big 12 will be devalued and the Big 10 will be propped up like it keeps getting propped up whenever, I don't know, the Big 10 had two teams in and neither one made it to the national championship game. I mean, I think that Ohio State-Georgia game was kind of the national championship game in some aspects because clearly that was a closer game and more fun to watch. But, I mean, it's TCU's shot to be there. That's why it's 4 teams. If you want it to not be 4 teams, then make it back to 2 teams again. But we know that's not happening. We know it's going to go, to 8, 12? Forget at this point. 64? Why don't we make it just a 3-game series? If Georgia plays TCU 2 more times, maybe TCU's closer, but I don't think any of it's a game.
Yeah.
And to Jake's point, yeah, the Michigan game is bizarre. Like, Michigan outsmarted themselves out of that game repeatedly.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny because I, naturally have a lot of SEC stuff on my Twitter timeline, and there was just so many SEC fans going, well, TCU would go 8-5 in the SEC, and I'm like, all right, but they're not in the SEC. 2, it was schools like South Carolina and like Alabama and Florida, and I'm like, okay, then why didn't you guys go 8-5? If you think like there just comes this like high and mighty thing where people think that the transitive property is this like end all be all, like, hey, we played Georgia closer than TCU did, which means we're better. Which is probably one of the most unintelligent things you could say. And I don't even think unintelligent's a word. But
Kentucky held them to 16 points, so really they deserve to be in it.
Yeah. Let's just put 4 best SEC teams in and just play again.
I mean, Tennessee deserved a shot, right? Because Tennessee played Georgia close. I mean, it gets to be laughable after a while. I mean, we don't want to see any parity in college football.
Deserved a shot. Tennessee deserved a shot until they lost to South Carolina.
Right.
There you go.
I loved Hendon Hooker's Heisman chances until they lost that game and he got injured. But
I mean, I'm not gonna say, oh, you know what, K-State deserved a shot because they won the Big 12. Like, no one's having that argument. No one's having the argument that, oh wait, who won the Pac-12? Well, wasn't it Utah? Oh, they deserved a shot, or USC deserved a shot. And then, if Ohio State and Michigan play each other like 10 more times, who knows if Ohio State wins maybe 6 of those or 7 of those or whatever. But Ohio State still got in. I think they were probably the second or third best team in the country. But if they play TCU and Michigan instead plays Georgia in the first round, you just switch it because maybe Ohio State beats Michigan in the regular season, then maybe we do see a Michigan, Georgia in the finals or whatever, or Ohio State, Georgia in the finals, excuse me. But it's just, this is part of college football. This is why it's fun. This is like why it's entertaining. It's because anything can happen on any given Saturday. Like, TCU could play Georgia, like, I don't know, 50 more times, and then maybe TCU wins. I don't know how many times it would take because that just looks so unmatched on Monday. But that's why you watch college football. That's why Appalachian State beating Michigan is just such an incredible upset. It's because that should never, ever happen. Like, the scholarships out there, the guys out there, the different extremes, it's probably more extreme in that game for, like, stars rating than it is, like, TCU, Georgia on Monday night,
But what happened on Monday doesn't take away from how great a season TCU had. And I think it shows progress for the committee that they still put TCU in, even though they lost the Big 12 championship game. And it wasn't all of this recency bias of, oh, you just lost late in the season. Sorry, you're done. Even though it was your one loss, you lost late, so that's it. I think that's at least progress that they still put them in, let them play the game. And you saw what they did against Michigan, and things happen in the national championship game.
Yeah, it's annoying to me that the narrative at the end of the day is TCU got beat really badly instead of TCU had an incredible season after barely making it to a bowl game last year, having a brand new head coach, and then going on an undefeated run until the last regular season, led to the last game of the season of their conference or whatever you want to say, Big 12 championship game there. And that game they lost on like the goal line, almost like how Oklahoma State lost against Baylor the year before. I mean, it's just got to get games out of that AT&T Stadium down in Dallas. Maybe that's what'll happen, where plays won't end up on the goal line every time. Oklahoma State doesn't really win down there anyways. I think we're like 0-4 in that stadium.
Well, USC Tulane, the Cotton Bowl in AT&T Stadium, came down to the goal line as well.
Great point. Oh my gosh.
Well,
yeah.
The other point to make about the SEC, Georgia beat the hell out of LSU. Like, that game wasn't close. And that was the team from the West that got to represent the SEC. You know, it wasn't Alabama. So Alabama was what? Didn't they finish like third or something? Tied for third or tied for second in the West?
Tied for second with LSU in the West.
No, not with LSU. LSU was first. Oh, they won the head-to-head.
The conference standings, yeah.
So, like, Alabama they didn't win their conference, so why would they be in? Would they have put up a better fight against than TCU? Probably. It was 65-7. Us three would have put up a better fight against Georgia. Like,
Well, hang on a second. I'm going to speak for myself here. No, I wouldn't have scored. No, we would not have scored.
But,
we would have gone 0. In fact, there would have been some safeties in there as well, too. Let's just be honest, all right?
But, like, it's just, I don't know why there's always this conversation in football, and we don't have it in basketball. Like Shrull said, like, not sitting there going, oh, St. Peter's better than Kentucky. You know, like, that's just not doing that. Because it's ridiculous. But to sit here and say, oh, well, TCU didn't deserve it. What, you want LSU in there again? Because they lost by 20. They lost by 20.
Well, I want to ask you guys, this is from all of us being sports media students. How much do you think that this is a narrative of the SEC owning, the other way around, ESPN owning the SEC rights and then ESPN broadcasting the game? Is there any validity into like the fact that ESPN would want to drive an SEC narrative over and over, and that's why we're hearing like, hey, why isn't it Alabama? Hey, why isn't it, these other teams, instead of them saying, hey, why isn't it USC? Right? Because just why isn't it like a different, like why is it a Big Ten or an SEC team and not a big, basically a Pac-12 team, I guess?
I think you listen to any like actual smart people, and they're not saying that. And you can also get it on any of the I think there's people on all of the networks that are saying they think it should be another SEC team. So I don't think it's necessarily the ESPN bias. I will say I was very impressed with the way TCU fans traveled to SoFi. It looked like half TCU. It was half purple in that place. That was really cool.
Yeah,
it was really awesome. I will say, I know firsthand experience, there were a lot of people who were extremely upset that Michigan didn't make it because they're trying to resell their tickets for that game. Ticket prices were dropping like no other. They started out at around $1,500, just out the bat, and then by kickoff, they were around, on the day of kickoff, they were around like $500. So it just was interesting to see like how many people came or didn't come, or what the ticket price was, so people didn't lose any money. And that was just kind of an interesting thing that I saw.
Yeah, and I think ESPN they won in Michigan over TCU. It's not really a discussion. I mean, especially given the numbers came out and it was like the least watched national championship game in since the playoff started. So,
well, but what does that mean? I guess I want to ask.
You have it on a Monday night.
Well,
that's what I said.
But I also just want to ask, like, is that because the game was also at 4:30 Pacific? Is that also because the game's not usually this early?
Well, it was right. It was this early because it was here.
But what I'm saying is, it's not usually that early for the city it's being played in.
Yeah.
Like, if it's in Dallas, it's usually like 6:30 or whatever, and then in Dallas it's 6:30. Like, you're going to have a hard time, like, convincing a lot of people on the West Coast to tune in for a game that's also, I don't know what I'm trying to get at here. But
I didn't even think about it until you said it, that people were driving home or still at work when the game kicked off. Like, that definitely has to play into it. Plus, TCU's not a blue blood, like, big program. they're kind of the underdog, the Cinderella of the year. So you're always going to get bigger ratings if it's an Ohio State, an Alabama, a Georgia, a USC, a Texas that have bigger alumni bases. That's just how it is. TCU is a private school in Fort Worth. They're one of the schools in that area, not the biggest. So, of course, it's not going to draw as many. And then the timing of it and everything. I mean, I think there's multiple factors that go into it.
Well, also, when it's not a game after basically the first quarter, and it's definitely not a game after halftime, when are the numbers pulled? Is that's my question to you, like, Jake. It's like, least watched game, like, okay, but is that least watched game all the way through? Is that least watched game through the first 5 minutes? Because if it's least watched game through the first 5 minutes, totally makes sense. Like, yeah, TCU small school. They're not Michigan, they're not Ohio State, they're not OU, Texas, USC, UCLA, whatever you want to throw in, right? Like, they don't dominate their own city necessarily. Like, I mean, there's, if you pull numbers, I'm sure the DFW Metroplex area, the most fandom school or the biggest, fans that tune in for any college football game is probably Texas, right? Like,
or A&M.
Texas or A&M. So
Texas, A&M, OU
clearly,
probably are the top three. But
yeah,
my point is
that's in their own city, own area.
But my point is more people obviously we watched it, but more casual fans would have watched the game if Michigan was in it.
Yeah, or Ohio State.
Or Ohio State.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really like, and it's not a slight against TCU, but we get pushed the Michigan narrative every year. Just like if Notre Dame played in it, more people would have watched because we get pushed that narrative every year. It's the same. It goes back to the media thing. It's the same consistent garbage that we get fed, and then we're like, oh my gosh, these teams can't compete with. I mean, again, no offense to TCU, but Michigan lost to them, and everyone was surprised by it. So, I mean, you had Stephen A. Smith saying they didn't play anybody because, but it's like that. People watch that stuff. That's the problem. People actually don't. They take what he says as it's like written in stone, and they're like, "Oh, you're right. TCU hasn't played anybody. These schools are all in the middle of nowhere. I've never heard of that." But that's what people think.
But I'm curious who these people are, though, at the end of the day, because if this is the majority of the people watching college football, then maybe there is a problem. But I don't necessarily think it is anymore. I think I think all three of us probably get our college football news and information in a different form or fashion, except for like Oklahoma State stuff. Yeah, like Oklahoma State would probably all kind of follow like the same, 3 or 4 different websites, Twitter feeds, whatever. But like national news, like, I don't know. I mean, I watched Colin Cowherd because we met him all, but like before then I wasn't really watching the Herd. I was just having on ESPN in the background, right? I mean, it's not like I'm following like a bunch of college football like on ESPN going like, oh, what they're saying is like the voice of God, or like, oh, Stephen A. Smith has a comment about college football. Man, I never hear his opinion. I wonder what he's got to say. But I don't like wonder what he's got to say and then take everything he says as like, oh, it's like stone cold fact. And I don't think a lot of other college football fans do, but I do hear his narrative, and he does have the loudest voice, and there is something to be said about that too. So I'm with you there. As far as like the Big 12, yeah.
He wouldn't be on TV if he didn't drive revenue. That's where this revenue comes from. I have no idea because I have a brain, but people watch it, I guess.
I don't know. I just also think it just may not be all that deep too. I think like you have the guy getting paid the most by the biggest network for talking sports, and his primary focus is not college football. So, but you're going to want to hear his opinion on the biggest stage, like, hey, what did you think about this? Like all the biggest, I mean, I thought all the biggest stars were, here for the game. I thought Shrull was going to fly out, So in the day, like it's one of those things, Jake, I thought you were going to drive up here, try to see, hey, all right, got to have all the biggest celebrities in town, see what's up. But with that being said, yeah, well, with that being said here, what did you guys think about the Big 12 season as a whole? I mean, clearly the Oklahoma State season didn't go as we wanted to, but did either of you guys expect TCU to be this good at all? Sonny Dykes' first year?
The conference this season ended terribly with how bad they did in the bowls.
Yeah.
2-6, not counting the actual national championship game. That would make them 2-7 because TCU had to play twice. Awful bowl season for the Big 12. But overall, I thought it was a pretty entertaining season. I mean, you had the storyline of Kansas through the first 5 or 6 weeks of, wait, are they actually going to compete? Can they play with the big dogs of the conference? You didn't know that. K-State had some really good games. They played really well. Oklahoma State, are they going to be good? Oh, maybe not. Oh, I don't know. Texas looked bad. They got their quarterback back. Oh, maybe they're going to make a run. Oh, I don't know. So I think there are a lot of really good storylines of the Big 12 this season.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, clearly the Oklahoma State fandom was good for the first 6-7 weeks and then dropped off pretty rapidly after that one. But besides Oklahoma State's story, I didn't see TCU coming in. I didn't see TCU winning. I didn't see TCU being this good whatsoever. It does give me hope that in the rest of the Big 12 can get notoriety and can get kind of a more national stage because TCU can have a year like this out of nowhere, right? Like who's saying that? I'm not saying like Texas Tech could do this next year, but I don't know. I didn't see TCU doing this whatsoever. So I didn't see Kansas making a bowl game this year. I didn't see K-State winning the Big 12. Any of this type of stuff. I didn't see Alabama barely beating Texas by 1 point after Texas' quarterback goes down in the first quarter. Didn't see that happening whatsoever. So I think it was a really good Big 12 year, especially in my mind. It's another good year whenever OU and Texas are not in not in the Big 12 championship or not making a run at the Big 12 championship again. When they're the two schools who have the most notoriety, the biggest names, but are also leaving.
Well, and now the Big 12 just adding 4 more teams to add to the intrigue. I think the Big 12 as a conference is going in a really good direction.
Yeah, I think I think you're totally right, and the Big 12 as a whole is heading in a good direction. But I really just can't wait to see what the Big 12 schedule is going to look like this year.
Mm.
Is OU going to have to go play one weekend at UCF, the next weekend at BYU? Who's going to get stiffed with this? Because it's like Oklahoma State's going to have like a bad back-to-back weekends too. Like everyone is. There's 16 or 14 teams, next year, right? So everyone's going to be dealt like some type of bad scheduling snafu here. I mean, somebody's going to have to go play West Virginia and then the next weekend go play in Lubbock or something, right? Like it's just going to happen. But I'm really hoping Texas and OU have to deal with the worst of it, especially if it's their last year in the conference.
Not to be the burster or breaker of bad news, John Paul Richardson just committed to TCU.
I mean, good for him. I mean, I don't know. Like, what are we going to do?
We can't stop all of our receivers playing in conference, right?
I mean, Stephon Johnson, like, good for him. John Paul Richardson, good for him. But, like, I want to ask you guys, we can talk about this now or later, but any Oklahoma State guys that have left, are you like, oh my gosh, how in the world are we going to replace him except for Sanders, except for quarterback?
Yeah, for me, it's not any one person. It's the magnitude of how many people. Because, I mean, they have an overhaul they have to do this offseason. I mean, pretty much every wide receiver left. Like, legit, almost every wide receiver, it seems like, left. So that's a whole group you have to replace. And then you're losing offensive and defensive guys too. So I think it's just the totality, the number of people that you're having to replace and kind of start anew once you get to the fall.
And it is some like higher quality, higher upside guys too. So it's not only is it the amount, but there are some of those, like, especially in the wide receiver room, there's some guys there that you're like, oh, these guys are good. I think probably the more like just the more damning thing is like these people are staying in conference. Like there's rumors that now that Bryson Green's going to OU.
Well, I mean,
so but it's like that's not a good look. It's just not. Because, if John Paul Richardson goes to A&M or whatever, we're like, okay, well, we know why that's happening. But, I mean, losing a guy to TCU, losing a guy to Houston, I don't know. Saying I'd rather play for Dana Holgorsen than Mike Gundy is pretty funny to me. just because on a nutball rating, Dana's pretty high up there, but he's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. But yeah, it's just I do think that a lot of it has to do with the quarterback coming in as well. I think the players probably knew before we all did, obviously, that he was coming.
I'm going to try to paint it in the best light possible, as I frequently do here, especially as any Oklahoma State fan who wants to listen into a podcast, try to paint it in the best possible brush here. But when I look at it through this, like through a rose, through an orange tinted lens here, it is a wide receivers are transferring in. We have a bunch of wide receivers on the depth chart already. And basically, are you going to see playing time? Like, are these guys just going, John Paul Richardson just going, you know what? I don't know who's going to be quarterback next year. And again, maybe he knew about Bowman coming in or not, whatever. But maybe he just went, oh, crap, dude. They got like another transfer wide receiver in who's definitely going to see playing time because this is like last year of eligibility or second to last year. Then they have another running backs coming in. So they're probably going to be, probably going to be giving it to the backs a bunch because who knows going to be quarterback next year. And then the other part of this that's a big deal is that it just didn't look great how the season ended. So they're like, you know what? Like all these three things together, you know what? I'm going to try my hand somewhere else. I'm going to leave because of those reasons. I'm not going to leave because the state of the whole program is horrible or because, hey, it's a big program deal. I'm going to leave because of just personal reasons. Like Stephon Johnson, like, you know what? He scored a first touchdown in the bowl game. He looks awesome. He's had great games for Oklahoma State, but he played a lot because a lot of our guys were injured this year. And when I'm looking at it through this orange-tinted lens, which is clearly very biased, but still, when I'm looking at it that way, it's like, okay, well, how bad is it? John Paul Richardson, one of the best sure-handed receivers I've seen play for Oklahoma State in quite a long time. Like, when that guy was throwing the ball, he made some catches that I was like, wait, where'd the ball go? I thought it had to go through his hands, instead he pulled it in. But sucks that he's leaving for TCU. I think it really sucks because we'll probably see him make some great plays against us. But then again, I'm going to try to trust the staff, the guys on the roster, or I'm going to go try to be a recruiter for the team. Like, I don't know. Like, there's not much, it's always fun to talk about, but, hey, Bronny James is playing in LA on Friday. Should I go recruit him for Mike Boynton? We'll see. I mean, it's just kind of like how much more can we do as fans here when it's like, got to believe in what's going on with the program. Well, I think it's fine to be mad about it. Like, I'm not going to be out there just calling for Casey Dunn or Gundy or Derek Mason all get fired when I think last season was just bizarre overall.
I think if you're ever going to try to rebuild a team in 1 year, the way the transfer portal works now, you can do it. It's a little harder in football than basketball where one guy can really change things. But,
yeah.
I mean, the way people are transferring left and right now, you can bring in guys and re-rack and go at it again. As long as you have the coaches that can kind of pull guys together, get the chemistry built, and get everyone on the right page at the start of the season, you can go find guys from D2, FCS, small D1 schools, small FBS stuff, bring them in and put them all together and make it work. There's really good players at smaller schools that would love to come play in the Big 12. You just have to find the right guys, and you have to have the coaching to make it all work. And so that's really the big thing is, can Gundy and the staff bring them all together and make them all mesh? Because we've seen Alan Bowman in Stillwater play really well and beat us bad. He could do it again. Granted, it's been a few years, but maybe he still has it in him. And maybe the guys that they bring in can all work together. But just it's down to coaching.
Yeah, I know people were getting pretty excited that Bowman tore us up 5 years ago or whatever it was. I'm not, and I'm not going to lie to myself and say that I'm excited. But, like, Shrull, in your opinion, do you think that based on what we know about Alan Bowman and what we know about the team, is he going to provide? Are we going to be that much better with him than we would be with Rangel or whatever?
I don't know. Rangel, it
But
looks
like
like he needs some time.
because I
But
told Calvin the other day that he like Alan Bowman's coming to start. Like that's what he's going to start all year,
Yeah.
and nobody else is going to play unless he gets hurt. That's what's going to happen.
or if he just looks really washed up. But I mean, yeah, he is coming to start. But I'm not more excited with him than I would be if, well, obviously I'd be more excited if Spencer was coming in. But I mean, you're getting a guy who is probably less athletic, a guy who, I mean, I kind of forgot he was even where has he been the last few years? I don't know. I bet a lot of people don't know where he's been.
He threw 11 total passes at Michigan in 2 years.
Yeah, so
And Michigan, maybe that's because he couldn't beat out really good quarterbacks who made it to the national championship game or made it to the semifinals, whatever you want to say, right? Like, I'm hoping that's the reason. Like, if this guy is like, Jake, I'm with you. Like, it's not a great thing that like we got Bowman when we did, and we didn't get like Brennan Armstrong or any of these other guys that are really highly touted, like Grayson McCall, right? But I think he transferred to Liberty. Like,
No,
we lost a guy to like, or okay,
he's
so he's
staying at
staying.
Coastal. Yeah.
But my point being is like, I'm trying to look through this best case scenario. It's not a great state of Oklahoma State football right now. Like, it doesn't, like, there's not a lot of people who are out here like, hey, you know what? Like, it's all right. Like, we'll be fine. Maybe I'm one of the few who's like, you know what? Like, I don't know. There's a good possibility that we'll be all right. There's a good possibility that we can make a bowl game again in a rebuilding year. And that's what I would hope to see. Like, bowl game and rebuilding year, cool. Last year, that should have been a rebuilding year, maybe. But then again, after you make the Big 12 championship game and then you beat Notre Dame, who at the time was top 10 in the country. This year, granted, they didn't look that great, but last year they did. And this year, honestly, at the end of the year, they looked fine. But you would think all this momentum would help us get to another Big 12 championship. When we beat Baylor at their place, hey, none of us were concerned. Then all of a sudden, it looks like every single thing in the entire world hit the fan all at once for Oklahoma State football. Don't know how that's possible, but it is. And we went from a team that was 6-1 to a team that was 7-6. Like, it really sucks to say, but if we have two rebuilding years, like, okay, and last year was one of them, this year's one, like, okay, you know, Zane Flores, redshirt freshman, starting off 2024 season, let's go. You know, and we'll see what we got.
Being a college football fan is all about expectations. And
Yeah.
the way OSU ended it 2 years ago, you almost win the Big 12 championship. You're so close, you lose, but then you go play a bad first half and a great second half against Notre Dame. And you're like, oh, okay. So the expectations are high because your quarterback is back. You got some new guys that you're excited about. Expectations are high. I don't know what the preseason win total was, but it was probably like 9 or 10. And so everyone's like, oh, this is a team that could compete for the Big 12 championship game. That probably was not the right expectations for that team. Next year, expectations are, let's make a bowl game. Let's, get to 7 wins or something. If we can go, I haven't looked at our non-con, but if we can go 3-0 in the non-con, win a couple conference games, maybe take one on the road against a Baylor again or a TC, whoever. That's fine. You don't have to be competing for the conference every year, and especially adding these new 4 teams in, it's going to be tough. Not every team can win the Big 12 championship every year. So I think our expectations just need to be a little bit lower. And if we exceed those, then that's when you can be like, hey, this is a great season. If we meet them, you're like, hey, that's what we expected. We're fine. We made a bowl game. We can keep on moving.
Yeah, my expectations for next year aren't very high, and they're probably lower than the year we made it to the Big 12 championship, because I remember Calvin and I talking, we're like, we have no idea what to expect. Like, none. I don't know what we're doing, and I think that was fair at the time. That was a fair assessment. And I would say this past year, like, my expectations were probably higher than my expectation for this past year are higher than the last 3 years, I would say. And it was our worst year since our freshman year of college, right? That sound right? When we played Washington in that Cactus Bowl thingy. So
James Castleman game. That was amazing.
I think you're right. It's all about expectations, but I think with Oklahoma State, it's probably time to start raising them and start demanding a little bit more. I know Calvin and I have talked about that a good amount, and we're just at the point now where we just think we should be playing for Big 12 championships. Like, we just should. And we shouldn't be getting beat out by Kansas State and TCU. Like, I know TCU made it to the national championship, but I don't want to bring up the Gundy thing, but it's been 16 years. And we played for one.
Well, I mean, but I'm gonna have a problem with that statement just because when did the Big 12 championship start? Because
we've played for one and won one outright.
Okay, in 16 years.
In 16 years.
All right.
And I think it's time we start raising the expectations. Now, Sonny Dykes could never go to another national championship again, and if I had to gamble, I would say he probably doesn't. But it's like you said, Calvin, like, you catch lightning in a bottle sometimes, right? Like, you just figure it out. Everything clicks. Everyone stays healthy. I know they talked about that a lot, how TCU's entire team was like healthy all year. And we didn't get to benefit from that, obviously. But the 1 year we catch lightning in a bottle, we still lose. And so it's like, obviously, if we had a playoff then, we would have played in it, as we know. And we don't really know what would have happened after that. But I just think as a program, it's time to start raising expectations. And Alan Bowman doesn't do that for me. Just going to put that out there in the ether.
But should expectations for Oklahoma State really be a conference championship every game? So I'm just theoretical. So Gundy took over the 05 season.
Mm-hmm.
They hadn't had a 10-win season since 88 before he took over. Since he took over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10+ win seasons. There's been, some 7, some 8-win seasons mixed in there, a couple 9s. But ever since he went 4-7 his first year, the Cowboys have won at least 7 games every year. So they were bad before.
Yeah, they were bad.
Over.
So
they've been really, like, it's Stillwater, Oklahoma. It's not like you're living in California or Florida or somewhere great. So you're having to recruit off of, we're a good team. I mean, yeah, they've had good seasons. That doesn't mean the expectations every year should be what it is at Texas, Alabama, Georgia to win the conference every year.
And I think, Calvin, we've said play in one of them every 2 to 3 years, right? I think that was kind of where we were like, yeah, this is the point we need to get to. And I agree, like, the 10-win seasons are great, but I brought this up before. I just, like, I don't give, and I know I'm going to not cuss, I don't care about bowl game trophies. I don't care.
I know, but some of us do.
The Fiesta Bowl's great, but, like, I'm not going to sit there and go, you know what? Lost the Cactus Bowl. Dang it. I don't care.
Well, I don't care about, I mean, to be honest, I don't care about losing the ones we lose, of course. But, like, I am going to go, hey, you know what? Like, we've got 2 Fiesta Bowl trophies since Gundy's taken over. We've been to how many, like, New Year's Six Bowls? I mean, at this point, since Gundy's taken over, we played Ole Miss, unfortunately, in 2 of them and gotten the boat dragged out of us. But, like, that's not even the right terminology there. But it's still, like, I don't know. I can't be all down. Like, I can't be either, like, national championship or Big 12 championship or it sucks. Like, I'm with you. Like, I don't want to see another 7-6 season. Like, that sucks. Like, I don't really next year, I'm not looking forward to it because I think we'll probably honestly be lucky to win 9 at the end of the day, right? Like, that's not a great mentality. But I am much more as a person just hopeful. Like, I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying as an Oklahoma State fan since like 93 when I was born, it's hard for me to go, oh man, we suck. Like, I'm not honestly even saying like, hey, Gundy's the greatest coach ever. Or we got to keep Gundy around. Like, I'm fine with the head coaching change if someone's like, hey, you know what, Gundy just cannot talk to reporters this way, or he can't be like this PR dude, or you know what, there needs to just be more transparency from the program in general. But I'm also willing to look at it this way. We're recruiting the right kind of guys, you would think. We're recruiting the kind of guys you think we could get previously. And we're not seemingly capitalizing on our recruiting record year over year, which that kind of sucks. And that's the one area where I'd go like, okay, so last year, we recruited a 4-star quarterback, Zane Flores, got him. Year before that, we recruited Garrett Rangel, 4-star quarterback, got him. A couple years before that, recruited a 4-star quarterback, best player in the state of Texas that year at least, Gatorade Player of the Year. I think that's how that works. Got him. You mean like we got Ollie Gordon, we're getting these guys. It does suck when we don't have when Rangel is not a maybe true 4-star. Like, he doesn't look like it. He doesn't look like Sanders or Rudolph or J.W. Walsh or whatever. Like, that does suck. But then again, sometimes the expectations don't live up to the hype. Like, we've been outperforming our recruiting for quite a while. We just paid Rob Glass the most amount that any college is paying their strength and conditioning coach. Like, he's getting paid $1 million a year, more than any other coach in college football. It's our strength and conditioning coach is getting paid the most, right? So we're putting, I think, the resources in the right spots. I think we're in a positive trend. It just is, this year was so bizarre. I mean,
so let me ask this question for Shrull, because I've asked you before, Calvin. Are we more? There was a word you used earlier that I really liked. Do we feel more confidence going forward in the football program or the basketball program?
I mean, you know where I stand on that, so.
Oh, I don't know. Man, I mean.
And I'm not talking about what you really see on the court. Like, I'm talking about the program as a whole. That includes head coaches. That includes what people think of it. All of that kind of stuff. Just like going forward, which one are you like, yeah, I would really be able to invest in this versus this? And I know you're invested in both, and you're not going to not invest in one of them, but which one do you have more confidence in going forward?
Probably football.
Really?
I think because and maybe it's just recency of seeing guys like Malcolm Rodriguez come out of the program and be a really good NFL player, and knowing, hey, we're doing things to get good players. I don't know that I hadn't thought about that. It's tough because I really like Mike Boynton, and I think we have some good players. I mean, I just watched last night's game against K-State, and we looked rough at times. So that's
we can
tough.
talk basketball another day, obviously. But I like my thing with basketball, and this is what I've always said. It is harder to make the NCAA tournament than it is to make a bowl game. Fact. Like, that's just objective. 50% of teams get to go to bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
And 20% of teams get to go to the NCAA tournament. And it's just sheer numbers at that point. People want one of them fired, and people want to keep one of them.
Yep. It's fair.
I mean, you got a good point for sure. You got a good point. Last thing I want to leave this on a positive note. Well, I mean, I like Mike Boynton a lot. I feel like he's not gotten a fair share, but at some point, the Big 12 sucks. But at some point, I'm starting to go, hey, your recruiting classes are awesome, man. Like recruiting class year over year is just insanely good for being Oklahoma State. So let's like capitalize on that. Like let's like last year couldn't make the tournament. You can't recruit, you can't get scholarships. Like it's hard for me to go like, oh, like I don't think basketball's in a great direction. It's easier for me to go, I don't think football's a great direction when we got a bunch of guys in the transfer portal. I mean, it's easier to go like, hey, I don't think football's in a great spot. We got a bunch of guys in the transfer portal. But then again, like we lost a bunch of receivers, but we had 2 transfer in. We had an offensive lineman and a tight end transfer in. We've got like 10 plus players transferring in. We do have a lot of guys leaving. We also have a lot of guys like Bryson Green, who has announced where he's going. Spencer Sanders has announced where he's going. And I do want to leave this on like a very positive note here. If Spencer Sanders is healthy for every game and he's able to play every game, he probably doesn't return back to Oklahoma State and probably already leaves for the NFL draft, right? I think we're kind of all like, if it's a possibility. I mean,
or goes to an SEC school, like.
But still, like he probably doesn't. What I'm saying is like he showed so many great flashes that if he had just stayed healthy, probably doesn't come back, which only speaks to how good we were as a program overall, and. Sanders played in, it's going to time out here with the music. Sanders played in 20 games between his true freshman and true sophomore season, or whatever you want to say. And then he's counted as playing 10 games this year. I guess he did, but it doesn't seem like it. It seems like he played in like only 8, right? And then he's played in 13 the year before, and that was our best season. So maybe Alan Bowman will be healthy the whole next year. We can see what we got with him. I don't think it'll be awesome. But then again, you know what? Like, maybe Zane Flores will be able to stay healthy for all 3 years, and then we can see what our true potential is. Nothing on Sanders, like guys get injured, it's what happens. But I'm just saying, injury bug hit us with Sanders maybe at the worst possible timings, worst possible years. So that being said, Brian Shrull, Jake Carlson, thanks so much for joining me here on the latest episode of the CGA Tour. Please follow out the CGA Tour on Twitter and Instagram for more, and I timed this perfectly. We'll catch you guys again soon. Peace.